Obviously, you mentioned earlier that you clicked with Terry and her husband at the IFA, and you knew, okay, this was right. They were right for you. You guys were right for each other to work. But I'm curious to know what were some of the attributes of the brand that made you think that this is the right brand? This is the opportunity for me to jump into. And by the way, you've had an incredible run of success as being CEO of the company. I mean, I know you shared with me earlier that you've got now 62 franchises open. You guys are in 30 states. You got your 4 company-owned locations. And this is all just a matter of a few years, right? She had 3 franchises before you came aboard. So share with the audience, if you would, like what really made you connect, no pun intended, with Kidokinetics.
Yeah, for sure. So I didn't know a lot specifically about that industry when Terry and I met. So I just kind of started with looking at the fundamentals, right? Like how I was impressed, I guess, with the fact that she had 3 franchises at the time who'd been around for a while. Like the first one joined in 2008. So by that time, he'd been in the system for 12 years, successful, happy, doing well, profitable, he was checking all of the right boxes. And then she'd added another franchise a couple of years later, who was one of her coaches in her local business in Florida, purchased a franchise territory and was also in the system for a decade at that point and successful and happy. And then there was another one in North Carolina that same story, was there and happy and successful. And they liked Terry. They liked the business model. They felt like there was a lot of long-term opportunity in the industry. And so, all of the basic fundamentals were like pointing towards a great success story. And then I kind of looked at the industry and said, well, how does this industry do? Like, is Kidokinetics a one-off and really doing their own thing and there's nobody else out there like that? And the answer is no. I mean, there's several brands out, building and scaling successful companies in that space. The biggest one is someone that I know well, and that's the brand Soccer Shots. Justin Bredeman, who's the CEO there and was one of the co-founders, was and still is a good friend. And I knew a lot about the Soccer Shots program just from my friendship with Justin. And he and Frank Milner, who introduced Terry and I, and a bunch of other franchise guys, have been kind of meeting, from time to time and getting together. And Justin's been in that group for a while. So I knew a lot about it, and they had great fundamentals, just at scale, right? So at that point, they were like a $70 million system, really strong, like 700 or 800K AUVs for multi-territory. Good margins, highly functioning franchise organization. The franchisor was doing well. The franchisees were doing well. Very little turnover, high, franchise business review kind of scoring. And so I looked at that and said, well, gee, the Kidokinetics business model and Soccer Shots, for example, we're in the same business. Like we go to child care centers and offer a sports enrichment program. And the only real differentiator is they're a soccer program and we're a multi-sport program. So if anything, I thought, well, gee, there's more channels of revenue that we might be able to participate in that, it would be hard for a soccer-only program to do because, like, for example, Terry at that time and still was already doing a considerable amount of her revenue by teaching PE classes in private schools where, you have a small private school that doesn't really have a big enough footprint or big enough enrollment to justify a full-time PE teacher. They may only need like 6 to 8 hours of PE a week. Teachers of the other subjects don't really like teaching PE or feel comfortable doing it. So many of these schools have kind of like a PE problem. Right. And so we plug in there and solve that problem. We, write the curriculum, we bring the equipment, we bring the teacher, and we make it a real turnkey solution. Terry's been working in many of those same private schools for 20 years now. So really strong, just recurring revenue. That was the other thing that I thought was really interesting when I looked at Terry's P&L and the P&Ls of her existing franchises. Their expenditures on marketing annually were in the hundreds of dollars, like very, very little money being spent on marketing.
Sure.
And so it's a very grassroots kind of business with a lot of recurring revenue. Once you build these relationships with channel partners like daycares, preschools, Montessori's, and private schools, they produce for years and years and years after that. And so I thought, well, that looks like a really strong business model. And there was good industry validation out there that this works at scale.
Right. Dave, what do you think when you came into the company, right? What do you think were maybe some of the key, like 2 or 3 key things that you felt like needed to be, improved or radically changed to get this company on the trajectory that it's been on?
Yeah, I would say great foundational, elements already in place, like a good business model. Like that's my, entry point to franchising, right? Fundamental business models got to work. and it's got to work as a franchise, right? So the franchise can be successful and make a profit and still carry the cost of franchise fees and so on. So that was already in place. Culture was already really strong. Like Terry had a good culture. The people there were happy. And like I said, they liked Terry. They felt like she was a good leader and all of that. What they lacked was infrastructure to be prepared to scale. So no real systems in place. They did some ad hoc kind of training, but they weren't adding franchises at a regular pace. So that kind of had to be built. So we had to build a training program for new franchises, an onboarding system. One of the probably critical things that I felt like we needed to do right out of the gate was to start building a business management system. I built my own technology. I say I built, but I had people that built technology at 101 Mobility. That was the backbone of that business. And the flexibility that you enjoy when you build your own tech, I think was really important to me. So we started down that path and started building technology, and built a system called KetoLink, which we just a couple of weeks ago rolled out the kind of second generation of that system to our network. And, that's the main place that they go to run their business every day. So I started building that kind of technology. We needed capital. So I started looking around, sniffing around to see if I could pass the hat amongst my franchise friends and find some capital to bring into the business. So we had some fuel to grow, and those kinds of things. So it was structural, foundational systems, and then we started hiring the team. We hired our first employee just about 3 years ago. It was May of 2021, and she came on originally. Her name's Dina Landers, and she came on originally as our onboarding coordinator. She's now our operations leader, and probably like the best integrator, highly capable young leader that I've encountered in my entire career. And so she kind of runs the show, and we've now built a team of 13 people who help support our franchises every day. And so, that was a bit of a build over time, but all of those kinds of things had to be set up and put into place.
Sure. It's a solid number of people that you have in place for the number of franchises you have. So that's great. Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.